Thank you, Liz. So we've heard how we can compute on electronic medical records and on genomes to help identify patients with rare disease and find new treatments for them. Next, we're going to hear from Dekel Gelbman, who's started a company that's doing pioneering work in letting us compute on faces. So a lot of us think about computing on faces when we're using Google Photos or Facebook, but the electronic medical record isn't really that good at capturing faces in a computable way. So Dekel is this founding CEO of FDNA, a company that's developed a web and app-based platform called Face2Gene that is really one of the first pioneering next-generation phenotyping technologies that's really empowered people in my field and across medicine, I think, eventually, to recognize these rare syndromes. So this is a platform that launched about 4 years ago. It's used by the majority of people in the rare diseases community and has amazing potential. So let's hear from Dekel about this.
Thank you, John. And I'm very excited to be here and talk about FDNA today and about AI. By way of introduction, beyond what John said, my name is Dekel Gelbman. I'm the CEO of FDNA, and I had the privilege and honor over the last 8 years to see this company come from inception to where it is right now, to be able to develop the technologies and the products. With our platform, Face2Gene, we've built one of the largest networks in the clinical genomics space. It's comprised of labs, researchers, and clinicians, and it has about a little bit over 2,000 clinical sites around the world using this. With this network, we've been able to build possibly one of the largest phenotypic data sets in the world. But rather than talking about our technology and our products, as one of the few companies that brought AI into healthcare, I think that I want to share some of the challenges that we're facing on a daily basis with you and in bringing AI into the clinical workflow. So I'll give you some very specific examples from the rare disease and undiagnosed disease space to illustrate these challenges. Let's start first with a definition that I found on Wikipedia on what artificial intelligence is. So artificial intelligence is any device that perceives its environment, takes actions, and successfully achieves its goal. But when we think about this definition, does that really capture AI as we see it implemented now in real world? My personal belief is that AI has become such a buzzword that it's almost embarrassing to see a tech company that doesn't say that they do AI on some level. But when we talk about AI, we can very roughly divide it into two buckets, what we call narrow AI or weak AI, and what we call strong or general AI. I've rarely witnessed anything that I can classify as general or strong AI, and I personally think that we're decades away from that, because what strong AI means is that machines are going to have real cognitive capabilities. Now, we've seen many systems that have a lot of different sets of narrow AI, but I have not seen, at least in practice, anything that has real strong AI. Now, narrow AI is a completely different thing, and I think that most AI solutions that we see today fall into that bucket. And what narrow AI means is that machines are really tasked to do a very specific task, like facial recognition. And a good example of that is really processing big data and finding unique patterns about that data. And I think that, frankly, if you think about that, it's a task that machines are probably better than humans in doing. But in our environment, and specifically in healthcare, humans are still essential to that part of perceiving the environment and achieving goals. There are a lot of risks and a lot of fears that are associated with AI, right? Some are more tangible and some are a little bit exaggerated. I don't know about you, but I'm much more concerned that I'll have a malfunction in my autonomous car than an army of robots taking over the world. But when we talk about healthcare, we need to be vigilant and we need to evaluate the risks and talk about them very transparently as we see AI starting to be deployed into clinical workflow. Now, I'd like to talk about some of these issues. Obviously, I'm not going to catch all the issues, but one of the first things that come to mind when we talk about AI in healthcare is, will AI replace our doctor? Or will it just improve healthcare workflows and improve efficiencies in healthcare? Now, one of my favorite activities, and that's a privilege that I use as CEO of a company, is to go out to our users and ask them how they think AI works, how do they use our AI, and how do they think that we need to develop AI. And one of my absolute favorite answers that I get very frequently is not that Face2Gene has been able to pick up the exact diagnosis. I mean, that's great, but one of my favorite answers is that Face2Gene has been able to show information that without seeing it, I would never have considered in my life. And that's exactly how we as a company intend for our clinicians, users, to use AI. I mean, if you think about this, reaching a diagnosis is probably one of the most complex cognitive capabilities that exists. And physicians go through medical school, medical training, practicing years to hone in on that special skill. They don't do that in order to memorize thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of medical images in order to retrieve that from their memory. And by the way, the single worst answer that I've ever gotten by asking this question was from a head of the department that said, my residents are using Face2Gene like a GPS. And if you think about this, the way that I use a GPS, or most of you use navigation systems, this could be very bad for healthcare, for patients themselves. So when next time you use a navigation application, think about this image before you just blindly follow instructions. So as a company that considers itself a leader in this field, and I think this is a corporate responsibility that most companies need to take if they want to be part of the leadership of AI and promoting AI, is spending time investing in education. And particularly going out to the users, explaining what the AI is, how it works, and being very, very transparent about its capabilities, and even more importantly, its limitations. Now, we as a company spend a lot of time in education, webinars, educational material. We even have an app that we've developed called Face2Gene Academy that teaches medical students and residents how to use our phenotyping technology, how to integrate it into the workflow. And what you're seeing right now is something that I'm particularly fond of, and it's part of the series called Name This Syndrome. Now, the image that you see is a computer-generated composite photo, so it's not a real patient. And what we do is we present these series of photos to clinicians and ask them to guess. And by gamifying this, we're actually helping them to question AI and not just automatically receive it. Now, the second thing that I think is a major ethical issue within AI is the accessibility to data. And we've heard in both talks before me that this is an issue, but is AI really for everyone? Or is AI designed to be something for the wealthy and healthy and developed countries? And very similarly to how I described the physician's skill as kind of a sum of their experiences, in AI, the quality of the technology is a sum of the data that is training it. And one of the first things that we've noticed in our space when we first entered is that, unfortunately, most of the data captured in genomics and in rare diseases is associated with European descendants. There's very limited data for other ethnicities from other regions of the world, like Latin America, Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. And so if AI is supposed to democratize knowledge and improve healthcare, especially in developing world, that gap perpetuates, or that absence of data perpetuates and even increases the gaps between developing countries and developed countries. Now, as a company, we've tried to solve that, and we set a goal to become something more of a standard around the world. We've made our technology free of charge, and it's available as a SaaS platform. So right now, we have users from over 130 countries around the world using this. And I'm happy to say that more than 50% of the data that they're contributing is non-Caucasian. It's still very far from the mark that we want to achieve, which is really to represent population's diversity, but it's on the right path. And what we've seen, and this was an amazingly positive surprise, is that actually when we feed the system with diverse data, it makes it more robust. And we get rid of what we call the expert bias of training a system with the knowledge that we have. Now, the third thing that I want to talk about, and it's kind of the elephant in the room, is privacy, right? Due to recent event, this is something of a hot topic. But will AI risk our privacy even more than its risk right now? And will that outweigh the benefits for us as a patient community? Now, we've talked about this. We need to share data, especially in rare diseases. At the outset, we're talking about small portions of data. And without being able to share data across the world, we're not going to be able to have enough data to train AI. Now, the number one thing that clashes with that need of sharing data is patient privacy. And specifically for us, when we deal with patient photos, that is very identifiable information. So how do you balance these two conflicting needs? The way that we've approached this is actually through technology. In 2015, we have deployed a new deep learning system. And one of the byproducts of deep learning is that, at least for computer vision and facial analysis, it actually de-identifies the photo. So we took this entire end-to-end pipeline of deep learning and we put it on the cloud so that physicians can feel free to upload patients' information. And through this process of learning and then rolling out the technology itself, not the data, to everyone else in the community, we're able to share data without actually sharing the data. And so with that help of clinicians over the world training data, we're actually able to help patients. And this is a story of Keegan. He's a 4-year-old child with a syndrome called Smith-Lemli-Opitz. He was diagnosed at 4 years of age after being in and out of hospitals his entire life. And he was diagnosed with the help of our system, which helped Dr. Grip consider a disease that she would have never have thought of because Keegan misses some of the key features of that disease. Now, there's a lot to be said about AI and about the challenges there. And I think that if you leave my talk with something, is that while we're addressing these challenges, we need to continue to offer AI and integrate it into healthcare and into the clinical workflow so that we can benefit patients like Keegan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Declan. So actually, I recognize the physician in that the last photo, Dr. Grip. She's arguably one of the most talented physical exam rare disease experts in the world. So it's really a testimony to the power and democratization of this technology for dysmorphology and the recognition of rare syndrome.